water, toilets. There's a story there. But yeah, so the transcripts themselves were visible throughout. I know I'm probably pressing for time, but I just want to talk about one other project which I have a very different relationship to. 10 years later, there's a project called Black Figures.
Just would you do this like maybe two or 3 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do it. Which includes a big company in Sydney Festival, who's looking at forgotten stories or repressed stories of Aboriginal military service in the Wilderness Pacific. So I was the researcher on this project from 2002 to 2015, oh, sorry, 2012 to 15. And the reason I want to mention this project is because whilst it was a project about reclaiming forgotten histories, there were only particular kinds of ways of telling that history that were acceptable in that context. So this is a project that had about $1 million worth of government money pumped into it. It was an officially authorised project by the federal government, the Australian War Memorial, the Australian Defence Force. Opening night in Sydney had a row of about 20 people in military uniform, and the adjutants, the Chief of the Army, the Chief of the Defence Force, the Governor General, the Governor of New South Wales, and all, like, there was a whole row of uniforms, basically. And the reception, the poster show reception was quite something. So there were particular kinds of things that were allowed to fit within this reclaiming of lost history, and particular things that were not appropriate for that. One of the stories, some things couldn't be included because there was no archival documentation of these. So, for instance, looking at the potential impact on Aboriginal communities of the 1919 Spanish flu epidemic, there was no records, by and large, of this. Lots of returned soldiers, Aboriginal soldiers returned to Aboriginal communities, and then there were large deaths in those Aboriginal communities, none of which are documented because there were widespread deaths across Australia in general. And so because they fall outside the archive, there's not material to generate content or show about it. Some things there is quite a lot of content about, but they fall outside a particular proved heroism narrative that had to be included in this. In particular, I advocated very strongly for the inclusion of the story of an Aboriginal soldier by the name of John Hall, who there's a great documentary record of this person who then disappears, and it's perfect kind of ghosting. But of course, he's a deserter, which is why there's so much documentation, because as mentioned previously about legal inquiries, as soon as you interrelate with state power, there is more documentation retained by the archive. Because this man deserted on multiple occasions, there's police reports, there's court-martial transcripts, there's a beautifully poetic description by a police constable of a chase over several days, which is beautiful material, but not for an official history project.
Thank you very much. Chloe.
So I'm speaking as a researcher, of course. My work is predominantly focused on Asian art. Produced in Singapore, but Singaporean artists really my artistic presence. And so like my current position is as a researcher looking at these events or phenomena for which I have no direct experience. My secondary position is as a producer and participant of these events or phenomena, which have been continued in my view of what art in Singapore is or what Singaporean art is. So this is kind of like in a sense where I become the one who presents the historical documents in a similar way that artists in various mediums and genres might do. But I guess like I'm going to give two examples, one from Germany, one from Singapore today, and like kind of my question is kind of to see if like we can see whether or not there is space to think about the other kinds of positions that an artist as artist can then take. That in other words, like can an artist looking at historical documents be more than just a student and more than just an observer? So, first example, of course, Singaporean, because I'm going to think about Lee Wen. Lee Wen was born in 1957 in the British colony of Singapore. He turned his life toward art making in the late 1980s. And this was his signposted often by his enrollment in LaSalle in 1988. But of course, like his signature performance. All the Australians here should know him as Yellow Man, and that was 1990 in the City of London Polytechnic. So I'm thinking about Germany as well, whatever. So he began in earnest to establish himself as an international performance artist or performance artist after 1994 with the whole incident with the Decathlon performance art. The incident I'm interested in is in 1996 when he was then invited to Germany by Boris Nestluni for what was called MA, East West Study Project, a traveling exhibition and workshop that started in Düsseldorf and ended in Darmstadt. This was the first time he met Doris, who is also the founder of Black Market International Performance Art Collective that predominantly includes members from Europe. East-West in this context is not talking about Asia versus Europe, it's talking about East versus West Germany, or East versus, well, behind the Iron Curtain and yeah. So at MA, he also met other performance artists that were part of Black Market International, which includes Norwegian artist Roy Vara and the Irish artist Alistair McLennan, who's in performance art, so you kind of recognize these names. So since 1996, Leeuwen has had many exchanges with Boris as well as these Black Market artists, but even though he only officially became part of the collective in 2002. And this kind of like was precursor to lifting a ban on the lifting of the de facto ban in 2003 in Singapore. And this was an opening for Leeuwen to then return the favor, so to speak. So between 1996 and 2003, Boris, Roy, Alistair, and the rest of them were kind of inviting Leeuwen plus his friends to Europe. And like since 2002 with Asiatopia, not Asiatopa, which is organized by Children Artists. So he started to bring Black Market and the associated artists to Asia. And this, I mean, like, I'm very interested in this just because in terms of the kind of like Euro-Asian, Southeast Asian exchange. But yeah, so from 2003, he started his own festival in Singapore, Future of Imagination, and that was when Black Market began to come into Southeast Asia in earnest. Not only to Singapore, but like through that kind of like, he came to Singapore, like in shops like Jakarta or things like that. So, so yeah, so this is kind of like the history that Leeuwen has established with Black Market and Boris Nestluni through from 1996 all the way to 2003. The next incident I'm thinking about is when he then had his solo exhibition in the Singapore Art Museum in 2012, Lucid Dreams in the Reverie of the Real. This was the first solo exhibition he has had, and the state-sponsored, state-managed, state-promoted Singapore Art Museum, the place for contemporary art. And this was then the space where he did, maybe we can say it's a work first, or like kind of that was the germ for what eventually became Independent Archive. At that point of time, it was not called Independent Archive, it was called the Resource Room. For those of us who've been to enough exhibitions in recent years, it will be that room at the end of the exhibition where they put all the books up. But like instead of it being just like a room where like this is the historical material about this artist in a small like textual retrospective, he called it a resource room. He meant it as a work of art, and he within the resource room programmed a series of like improvisational performance, etc., etc. So this was more than just a room which had books and posters and like pictures and all that kind of thing. It was a space that was being activated. So after the exhibition, it became Independent Archive with its own website, with its own Facebook page, with its own social media, and like on I's website, it says the archive documents visual art practice in general and maintains special focus on ephemeral, timeless, and event-specific art that may escape documentation by conventional institutional policy. So like when we look at like IA, at least in its online presence and like the kind of like public documentation that is put out, like we are thinking about IA first and foremost as a collection of objects and a collection of documents that Leeuwen has accumulated since the beginning of his practice, let's just say 1988 when we enrolled in LaSalle. And the people around him, he's kind of like met so many people, and each of them collects a few folders or ephemera, takes a few photographs, like takes some videos, and this becomes the foundation of what IA is. And based on what we hear, on what we read about on their website and all that kind of thing, then there's that corresponding expectation that like once I began uh, with this foundational collection of stuff, he then also began collecting stuff, donations from like other practitioners in the field to then produce what is then IA. But what I experienced and what I saw in IA was that it was not that case. When you're actually there in the space, what you realize is that people are there to see IA. Or to see Li Wen. And like I think a good example of this is how Asia Art Archive has digitized IA's collection over the past few years. It started off as a project that said that it was digitizing independent archives documents, but eventually when Asian Art Archive published it, it was very easily renamed Li Wen Archive. There was no need to make a distinction. There's no need to say that like IA is different from Li Wen's archive, and Li Wen archive is not IA. There was no discussion about it, or rather there was no debate about it. So even at that point of time, I think it was late 2018 before Li Wen's passing. There wasn't that kind of problem. And this was like 6 years after IA has begun. So presumably you would think many documents have. So why I'm kind of like going through this is because I want to kind of think about I not just as an archive. I mean, it's independent archive, it's in the name, but it's more than just an archive because it's also an artwork or we can call an art project. It is hard to ignore the lure of the archive. It's like, as a researcher, it's like finding a fly trap, you just kind of like go straight into the archive. And it's not wrong. You can actually use the documents that Li Wen holds in his archive as a base for research. While we can use the words document, hold, archive, preserve, conserve, catalog, find, research, innovation, archive, in addition to we can also use words like hangout spot, maker space, jamming space, event space, artist studio. When asking people about what IA was, or asking people working in IA or affiliated to IA what IA was, some people have actually remarked to me that curators have visited the space not knowing it is IA but thinking it's just Li Wen studio because they actually overlap. It is the same space. 67 Archibald Street is Li Wen studio. 67 Archibald Street is also IA. So as an overseas curator, you might not know it very well. You don't actually know about IA. So what I'm getting at is that like it can be read as an archive, but the archive is kind of a partial reading of what IA is, and I was thinking today the idea of the non-elevation of the document, they kind of think it exists as part of the work, but at the same time is a non-authoritative aspect of the work, and in fact like the actual discussion really should be like why is this an art project and not an archive in the institutional sense held in I don't know, the NGD or something like that. So now I want to go back to Boris because what I've found is that people around I have also remarked to me that I was inspired by this relationship with Boris.
Could you do this in 2 minutes?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so Boris has his own archive called Die Schwarze Lade or Black Kit. And he started his archive as part of Art Service Association, which is his larger project where he places himself, which is a larger performance project where he places himself in service. So ASA's other works is Rent an Artist, where you can rent Boris for a day to do whatever you want as an artist. And you can also ask ASA to help you to do administrative services. So for him, in a sense, Die Schwarze Lade, the Black Kit is a place where you can look at documents and thus learn. But at the same time, when I was there at Die Schwarze Lade, what he was interested in performing the role of an archivist to me. So he sits there and he asks me what I need, and then he performs the role of going to the document, to the respective shop and telling me this is the document you need and taking it out for me. So he doesn't actually know, in a sense, what is in the archive, all he knows is that he has certain documents in the archive. So I wanted to kind of bring that parallel together in order to kind of think about like, we are not talking about interpretation when we talk about artwork, isn't it? We're thinking about, yes, like artwork that has an archival element to it, but like, is there something else we can say about like the role of what the artist is positioning the work to be? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. That's such a beautifully kind of complex and sort of pleasingly circular way to end these presentations. Considering you're a bit pressed